and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas Battleground residents who are responsive to public education measures are better able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their home. And whereas the 2021 Fire Prevention Week theme, which is Learn the Sounds of Fire Safety, effectively serves to remind us it is important to learn the different sounds of smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Therefore, I, Mayor Adrian Cortez, do hereby proclaim October 3rd through the 9th of 2021 as Fire Prevention Week throughout this city. And I urge all the people of Battleground to learn the sounds of fire safety for the Fire Prevention Week 2021 and to support the many public safety activities and efforts Fire District 3 and emergency services. And I'll go and pause right there. Is Fire Chief Sorensen on with us?
He is not. This is Assistant Chief Woodland, if I could help.
Absolutely, please. I'd like for you to accept this proclamation and maybe say a few words on his behalf.
Sure. Thank you very much. We will accept it. We are doing our annual, video competition for the kids in the schools where they get to present something to us to show us how they understand the sounds of safety. So that will be going on, and we do some school tours and go out and visit with the kids and help educate them on fire prevention. So that's what we'll be doing, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all of your efforts in our community. We really much value and appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Council, my second proclamation this evening is concerning Community Planning Month. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, towns, suburbs, counties, boroughs, townships, rural areas, and other places. And whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live. And whereas community planning provides an opportunity for all residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine the future of their community. And whereas the full benefits of planning requires public officials and citizens who understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States of America and its territories. And whereas American Planning Association endorses National Community Planning Month as an opportunity to highlight how planning is essential to recovery and how planners can lead communities to equitable, resilient, and long-lasting recovery. And whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the members of the planning commissions and other citizen planners who have contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of the city of Battleground. And whereas we recognize the many valuable contributions made by professional, community, and regional planners of the city of Battleground, and extend our heartfelt thanks for the continued commitment to public service by these professionals. Now, therefore, I, Adrian Cortez, Mayor, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2021 as designated as Community Planning Month in the city of Battleground in conjunction with the celebration of National Community Planning Month. And I'm wondering if Mr. Crummett would like to say a few words on this.
Well, Mayor, it's an honor to accept this reward virtually. I'll hang this in a prominent place and inform all the hardworking staff and interested citizens down at City Hall that it's well deserved. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Crummett. And sincerely, we do appreciate all your work. So much of your work and those that work with you goes unnoticed by a majority of the citizens, but we certainly acknowledge you and thank you for all the hard work you do.
Thank you.
All right, my third proclamation is on Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas breast cancer remains the second most likely cause of death for women in the United States, despite significant improvements in treatment and mortality rates. And whereas we recognize that all cases of breast cancer are emotionally and physically traumatic, no matter the outcome. And whereas October is nationally recognized as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, an annual campaign to raise awareness using pink ribbon imagery to offer support to those courageously battling this disease and honor those lives lost to it. And whereas we applaud the efforts of the medical professionals and researchers working to find the causes of and a cure for this deadly disease. And whereas this Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we recognize the experiences of breast cancer survivors, those battling the disease, and their supporters and loved ones. And whereas Breast Cancer Awareness Month is an opportunity to unite all citizens to prevent breast cancer deaths through increased education and regular screening. Now, therefore, I, Adrian Cortez, Mayor of the City of Battle Ground, do hereby recognize October as Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I encourage everyone to join in activities that will increase awareness of what Americans can do to prevent breast cancer, honor those we have lost, and lend our support to those who carry on the fight. And I don't believe, do we have anybody from the Breast Cancer Awareness Association or any related organizations here this evening? Not hearing anybody chime in. Okay, I will go ahead and move on to my last proclamation. This proclamation is in recognition of October being Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Whereas the City of Battle Ground, Washington recognizes and participates in a public awareness campaign to support National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month provides an excellent opportunity for citizens to learn more about preventing domestic violence and how to show support for the organizations and individuals who provide critical advocacy, services, and assistance to victims. And whereas acts of domestic violence occur every 18 seconds in the United States. And whereas domestic violence can take the form of physical, emotional, sexual, psychological, and economic abuse. And whereas oftentimes the victims of domestic violence are children who can have lifelong repercussions from the emotional or physical trauma of being exposed to domestic violence. And whereas domestic violence survivors and their advocates have rallied to the cause of victim justice. And whereas the government and many citizens of the City of Battle Ground recognize the need to treat domestic violence victims with dignity and compassion. And whereas we call on the aggressors of domestic violence to never be placed in positions of authority. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Adrian E. Cortez, do hereby proclaim October 2021 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Battle Ground, Washington. And I call upon our citizens to stand together against domestic violence, to offer support and understanding to survivors, and to participate in domestic violence awareness activities. And council, that concludes my proclamations this evening. I don't believe, actually, before I move forward, I don't believe, did we have anybody in the audience from maybe the Coalition Against Domestic Violence? I'm not seeing anybody here. Just want to double check.
Mr. Mayor, while you're looking, I see Kendra is on the line.
Okay, I'll go ahead and pause here as long as there's nobody stepping forward. Kendra, we just council just confirmed your appointment, and I'd like for you to say a few words if you are able to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate this opportunity to serve my community and hope to be able to contribute to the Parks and Community Engagement Board and see where best I can help out. I really appreciate the opportunity and the trust that's being placed in me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kendra, so much. And we look forward to hearing many great things from you working in this capacity.
Thanks.
Okay, Council, that's the end of my presentations. Before I move forward, Council, I'm instituting kind of a new, well, new to us, but it has been in place in past councils. I'm going to, after my mayor's report, I'm going to ask if any council member sees that they would like to add anything to the agenda tonight. And we could do so at this time. So I will go and pause here. Council, is there anybody would like to add anything to tonight's agenda? Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to make a motion that we add to the agenda the opportunity for us to waive our executive privilege that we had last meeting in our executive session with the city attorney, and have the city attorney tell publicly what the city's legal opinion was for the ordinance that is being presented tonight.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second. Before we move forward, is Christine on the line, our city attorney?
I am, Mayor.
Okay. Christine, do you understand this motion?
I do.
Okay. Okay. And again, Councilmember Bowman, you're saying that this motion only applies to the last executive session, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. If I could have the city clerk, please take, actually, let me pause here. Is there any discussion?
Mayor Cortez, if I may.
Yes, please.
Councilmember Bowman, so just because I want to make sure I understand the order, are you referring to the executive session for which out council retained?
The executive session that council had pertaining to the ordinance that we will be discussing tonight.
Okay, the reason I wanted to clarify is I believe that we have two executive sessions set up tonight. One would be with myself as the city attorney to give general advice on the ordinance. Council at the last meeting voted to have outside counsel retained to represent the body pertaining to employment. So are we talking about the first executive session then that would be the advice I was given? Okay.
Yes, the first executive session, your side of it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councilmember DeRosiers.
So we're just going to open up one of them instead of both?
Yeah, because we haven't met with the attorneys or got the opinions of the attorneys that are representing us.
Okay, any other discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none. If I can have the city clerk take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Bowman,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Munson,
Yes.
DeRosiers,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
and Mayor Cortez.
Yes. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, council, again, before I move on, any other items you'd like to add to tonight's agenda? Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to add, since we spoke last meeting about the sign poles down on the corners and budget is coming up, I would like to have that on the agenda as well so that we can give Ms. Erdman where we want to be, whether we want to spend the money or not.
Do you mind if I add that right after Ordinance 2021-20, the Juneteenth holiday?
That'll be grand.
Okay, so that will be added to the last item of our business before we get to administrative reports.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to our citizens communications. If I can have the city clerk read into record any citizens communications that have come in to the city.
So for citizen communications, this comes from Corinne Williams. Good afternoon. I'm writing to express my concerns over the September 20th City Council meeting. I have attended the virtual meetings for several months and have not encountered the unprofessionalism and blatant display of nonpartisanship as I did at this meeting. I do realize that political views are very different to separate from comments or actions. However, it is incumbent on city council members to model this separation. Specifically, I was disturbed by the following. Deputy Mayor Johnson called out Councilmember Munson for grammatical errors in a proposal Mr. Munson had submitted regarding medical freedom. Whether intentioned or not by Mr. Johnson, his comments came across as petty and as an attempt to disparage Mr. Munson. As representatives of the city, it is vital that the members be seen in the following light: supporting publicly, questioning privately. That was not conveyed at all. In accordance with Mr. Johnson's concerns about errors in written communication, I am wondering why he didn't call out Mayor Cortez for his error in his August 26th letter to the Clark County councilors regarding the interim position. Mayor Cortez incorrectly stated the election date as November 3rd, 2021. In actuality, it was November 2nd, 2021. Mr. Johnson chastised Mr. Munson for referring to government workers as bureaucrats and suggested he apologize. Once again, the idea of supporting publicly and questioning privately has not been modeled. The public needs to see their elected nonpartisan officers as a cohesive team. Mr. Johnson certainly models otherwise. Additionally, Mr. Johnson called on Mr. Munson to address all questions brought forward regarding the medical freedom proposal. In reality, the only questions asked of Mr. Munson were Mr. Johnson's own question and the one by Councilmember DeRochers. Sadly, this came across as an attempt to discredit Mr. Munson. As mayor of Battleground, Mayor Cortez has to discourage this behavior. By remaining quiet and letting this continue, Mayor Cortez indicated that he was in alignment with Mr. Johnson's inappropriate comments and actions. As leaders in any position, the notion that to whom much is given, much is expected needs to remain in the forefronts of our minds. Our city council members owe this to us and we should expect nothing less. Furthermore, I am requesting that my email be read into the record by the city clerk during citizens communications at the next city council meeting on October 4th. Next is from Kelly Thielen. Thank you, Battleground. This is a great city where I feel safe. Thank you for all you do. You have my full support. Keep up the good fight. And the last for written public comments is I want to thank the mayor for recognizing Domestic Violence Awareness Month. First, some sobering statistics. 41.4% of Washington women and 31.7% of Washington men experience intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner rape, and or intimate partner stalking in their lifetimes. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in the United States have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. It does not take one long to see the examples of these acts playing out all around us. I was also encouraged to see the proclamation that the council does not wish to see those guilty of domestic violence in positions of power. However, I was also surprised to see a mention of Councilmember Munson recently getting his firearm rights restored, which encouraged me to wonder for what reason. Therefore, based on my research and the subsequent finding of the council member's previous conviction of domestic violence, I asked the council to stand behind their proclamation and censure the standing council member. Based on Mr. Munson's Facebook comment on Clark County Today, where he said bad choices in personal life would spill over to elected life. This action seems warranted. This is signed by Anonymous.
Is that everything?
That was submitted to me, yes.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to say anything for citizens' comments?
Yes.
Okay, please state your name.
My name is Josh Van Gelder. Friends of Battleground community and nearby areas, us candidates were recently asked to sign a letter taking a stand against what we believe are fundamental
hang on,
rights.
Mr. Van Gelder. Mr. Van Gelder, I'm going to have to ask you to pause. When we have citizens communications, we do not campaign from the dais.
This is not campaigning.
You are by mentioning a campaign. So unless you have something other than campaign related items, please
This is
please
personal
state
stances.
that. No, you're talking about campaigns right now. So I'm going to have to ask you to refrain from talking about campaigns. Thank you.
Okay, this will be my personal statements then, apart from my campaign. While we agree that it is best to conduct ourselves in a respectful, lawful manner, we do not believe that we should ever condemn the exercise of free speech. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees, and I quote, "the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances," end quote. And any who currently hold or aspire to hold public office should do everything in their power to uphold not only these rights, but all rights. While we personally choose not to participate in rallies at people's homes, we would never tell anyone that they should not feel free to exercise their rights. We feel that flying the flag upside down is appropriate and patriotic, as it is a symbol of distress, and our country is currently undergoing deep distress today. That said, we do explicitly and unequivocally condemn and disavow individuals infringing of the rights on the rights of others, be that trespassing, vandalism, assault, or any other illegal activities. There is no place for these things in politics or a civilized society. The damaging of political signs is also not only wrong, but illegal, and a cheap effort to gain an unfair advantage in a race that should be based on the merits of the preferred candidates, not on damaging the appearance of opposing viewpoint. Personal attacks and damaging of campaign materials are cowardly acts, and our organizations pledge to oppose the actions on the highest level. Battleground is a beautiful small town with diverse beliefs and opinions. We condemn any efforts to silence the voice of the people, and we will always fight to protect the rights of all to express themselves, even if we disagree with them. Signed, Brian Munson, Josh Van Gelder, and Tricia Davis.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Van Gelder said that was his personal statement.
Yes.
Mr. Van Gelder, sir, that is not your personal statement, obviously, because you
It is
named
shared with
two
some
other
friends
people in
of
it.
mine.
Then why did
It
you
is
name
on
two other
behalf of
people,
us
sir?
personally, not on behalf of our campaigns, if that's what we need to do. And I am able to speak on behalf of my friends because they asked me to share their beliefs as well.
Well, Mr. Van Gelder, your friends are more than welcome to share their beliefs publicly.
Mr. Munson
didn't
has
want to
the
waste too much
microphone
time.
anytime.
We would condense it to save the time of the council out of respect for everyone's time.
Okay.
Mighty
All right,
big
let's
of
go
you,
ahead.
sir, mighty big
Thank
of
you.
you.
Let's go ahead and
Thank
move
you.
on. Okay, is there anybody else who would like to speak before the council? Okay, I see none. Council, I'm going to do something a little bit extraordinary here. I know when I was a council member, this really didn't happen. But given the fact that we've had two individuals put something into public comment that have lodged some serious allegations or some serious issues against two council members, one being Deputy Mayor Johnson and one being Councilmember Munson. I'd like to give both of those gentlemen the opportunity not to engage anybody, but to say a few words, if you would like, in your defense. So Deputy Mayor Johnson first.
Well, I would only say, Mr. Mayor, that over the years, Mr. Munson and I have been here. Mr. Munson, I believe, has been here just over 5. If one was to go back and look at our records, one would probably see that Mr. Munson and I have agreed on more than we disagree. One would also probably see that Mr. Munson and I have been on the losing end of 5-2 votes, 4-3 votes, probably more than most. So, though I appreciate Ms. Williams' statement, Ms. Williams, Mr. Munson and I disagree on this, and it's I guess the best way to say it is that he and I disagree. We will disagree in the future, but he and I will agree, as we have in the past months, on some things as well. So that's just the way this works. And so I appreciate you paying attention, Ms. Williams. I appreciate everyone paying attention. But Mr. Munson, I won't speak for him, but he probably will be who he is, and I will be who I am. And with that, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Johnson. Councilmember Munson, I'd like to extend this opportunity for you to say a few words.
Point of inquiry, Ms. Hayes, I believe in our governance manual, it talks about citizens communications, and at that time it's for citizens to speak. It's not for council to speak back to their communications. Is that correct?
Mr. Munson, right now I am controlling the meeting, and so I'm giving you the opportunity to say a few words. So you can take advantage of that or not, but I need you to make a choice.
Okay, point of inquiry is when I'm asking for legal guidance that is a governance manual issue that is the prevailing law of this meeting. So I can ask my question to the attorney and I can expect an answer.
Councilmember Munson, your inquiry is noted, but I'm not going to acknowledge your point of inquiry. So you
then I'm not going to acknowledge what you're asking me to do without some legal representation. So I yield my time back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Munson. All right, council, moving ahead to our consent agenda. Does any council member wish to see any item pulled from the consent agenda? If not, I'd look to entertain a motion to pass our consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Bowman. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Walters. If I can have the city clerk, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Bowman,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
DeRochers,
Yes.
Mayor Cortez,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, consent agenda passes unanimously. All right, council, moving on to our first item, which is a public hearing. This is the Sarkinen annexation. So we are going to be presented with some information, and we're also going to accept public testimony regarding the proposed Sarkinen annexation of approximately 79 acres in the northeastern portion of the city. We'll go ahead and turn this over to our Community Development Director, Sam Crummett, before we open up our public hearing. Sam.
Good evening, council and interested citizens. As stated before you is the Sarkinen annexation. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you see the picture of that map there? Okay. This is the annexation that you saw earlier this summer. The first stage in annexations under the petition method is you set the boundary. The council set the boundary as shown. Added during that process was the Tharp property to the west. The total parcels included here are 6. Total acreage is 79 acres. It's located just south of Crystal Springs subdivision, south of Northeast Hyacinth Road. Upon annexation, the zoning would be R5, which refers to residential 5 units per acre. I've provided plenty of other details in the staff report. I won't go through those, but at this time, I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and then ask that you would conduct a public hearing to gain any citizen input. I'm not asking for a recommendation at this point or a decision. That'll come at the point where we prepare an ordinance. Any questions?
All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's go and open up the public hearing. And then after we open up the public hearing and take testimony, then we'll go ahead and I'll give council an opportunity to chime in with any questions to Mr. Crummett. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open up the public hearing for the Sarkinen annexation. Please state your name for the record, and public hearing is now open. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody chime in. I'll go ahead and ask the city clerk, did you receive any testimony on this item? Any written testimony, excuse me.
Couldn't get my mouse to work. No, sir, I have not received any written testimony on any of the public hearings this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this time, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing for the Sarkinen annexation. Council. Questions for Mr. Crummett? Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Sam, there's a creek running through that. Do you know how many wetland what kind of wetlands that is in there? Has it gone that far?
No, I haven't calculated the amount of wetlands, but you're right. The Salmon Creek flows through that area. So there's going to be at minimum 100-foot buffer off of that creek. And I'm sure there'll be some wetlands in that area as well.
So that's 100 foot on each side or 50 feet on each side?
100 feet on each side.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Johnson. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody chime in. So, Mr. Crummett, I'm assuming this will come at our next meeting. Is that safe to assume?
That's not certain. There's a couple loose ends that need to be dealt with on the ordinance end, including a legal description and getting this verified at the county level, but we'll bring it back as soon as we can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, council, next up is the Hawkinson School District Capital Facilities Plan and impact fees. This will be a presentation and a public hearing. Council, we're going to be presented this evening with information regarding the collection of school impact fees as they relate to the Hawkinson School District. I will go ahead and turn it back over to our Community Development Director, Sam Crummett.
Good evening. I will go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, as stated, this is a proposal to adopt the Hawkinson School District's Capital Facilities Plan. And part of that is also to collect impact fees on behalf of the Hawkinson School District. As shown on the map, on the southeast portion of our city is an area that is within the Hawkinson School District. Much of this area is in wetlands or open space or parks or golf course, but there is a portion of this property that has the potential for residential development. In fact, there's a recently approved subdivision called Cedars East that's been approved for, I believe, 37 lots in this area. And it's the district interest to collect those impact fees on behalf of the school district. The school district, the Hawkinson School District, has their capital facility plan approved through Clark County. The impact fees being assessed for single family homes are $7,790, $3,434 for multifamily homes. The district's asking to mirror those same fees in the city. In terms of city impact, we would merely be these would be fees we basically collect at the building permit level, since this is within our jurisdiction, and then we would pass those along to the school district. The superintendent, Steve Marshall, is in attendance this evening if you have any questions for the district. Otherwise, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, council, let's go ahead and open up the public hearing, and then after that, we'll go ahead and take questions from council. And then if Mr. Marshall would like to say a few words to you, he'll have that opportunity as well. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for the Hawkinson School District Capital Facilities Plan and impact fees. Please state your name for the record. Okay, seeing nobody come forward, and the city clerk has already stated that there has been no written testimony submitted for any of the ordinances or the public records, excuse me, public hearings for tonight. I will go ahead and close the public hearing for the Hawkinson School District Capital Facilities Plan and impact fees. And Councilmember Bowman, I believe, has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Erdman, maybe you can answer this. When we do these impact fees for the school district, whether it be for Battleground School District or Hawkinson School District. Those are pass-through fees. So we charge whatever and we pass it through. Do we take any percentage for anything that we have to do? Are we taking, like the state takes a cut out of every time they touch our money, or when we do our business licenses, that kind of stuff? Are we getting anything to help for that?
Yes, we do take, I believe, I have to look to double check, but I believe it's a flat fee that we take, and I think it's around $50.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowman. Anybody else from council? Okay, not seeing anybody chime in. I'll go ahead and open up to Superintendent Steve Marshall. Steve, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, Mayor Cortez, thank you. And thank you, Sam, for again shepherding me through this process. Impact fees are an important stream of revenue for a school district, and I appreciate the city of Battleground considering approval of these impact fees for the Cedars East development. I understand we are, for our part, we need to provide the city with our capital facilities plan. Sam, is that correct? You do not have the updated capital facilities plan for the Hawkinson School District?
We do have the capital facilities plan, and when we do ask the council to take action, we'll have that plan referenced in the ordinance.
All right. Well, thank you for confirming that. And so, yes, I understand this is an important step in the process. And if you have the capital facilities plan, I think we're moving forward. So again, I appreciate the council's time. And I know that I think we missed out on 3 impact fees or something like that in the past. So this will really benefit our school district as development proceeds, I think, summer of 2022.
All right, thank you, Mr. Marshall. Sam, when will this come back on our agenda or future agenda?
It will come back in November. I just want to note there's a total of 6 separate comprehensive plan amendments. So I'm kind of piecemealing this before the city council, so it's not an overwhelming presentation. So we'll have one more this evening, and then I'll bring back a few others. But then we'll package them all together in November for a single ordinance adoption. I do want to note that the Planning Commission did recommend unanimous approval on this item.
Okay, thank you. That's important. All right, council, moving on to our next item. This is our comprehensive plan map and zoning map. Again, this will be a presentation and a public hearing. We're going to be presented with information and accept public testimony regarding the updates to the plan and maps. We'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Sam, once more.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen again. This summer, the council approved the land use master plan update. Within that plan were recommended comprehensive plan map, which essentially is the city's vision for land use for the next 20 years, as well as a zoning map. What is asked from you this evening is to adopt the city's comprehensive plan map, as well as the official zoning map, which would dictate future zoning designations in and without the urban growth boundary. The maps in your packet are currently redlined, so I don't want you to be confused by this section out to the west side of the city, which shows the urban growth boundary going out to the Dollars Corner area. We don't have the ability to modify the urban growth boundary at this time, but when the countywide comprehensive plan process begins, that's when we'll come back and look at our urban growth boundary. So I understand this is kind of a smaller map. It's hard to probably see everything, but this is the map essentially that you did adopt as part of the master plan updates. So there's no changes. This is the result of 2 years worth of work of looking at future employment, et cetera. I'm asking for a public hearing to be conducted. No action is needed at this time. Like I say, we'll have one ordinance that adopts all these in November. Any questions?
Okay, Sam, at this time, let's go ahead and open up the public hearing, and then we can take some questions that anybody may have to you. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for the comprehensive plan map and zoning map. Please state your name for the record. Okay, seeing nobody step forward on commenting on this item, and the city clerk has already informed us that we do not have anything in writing. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing for the comprehensive plan map and zoning map. All right, council, any questions for Mr. Crummett on this item? Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Sam, when will the county be doing theirs?
The county hasn't given a specific date. The countywide plan update has to be done by state law June of 2025. They are kind of finishing a buildable land study right now, and they stated that sometime after that, they'll open up the countywide process. It typically takes around 2 years just to get through everything. So I suspect 2022 or latest 2023.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Johnson. Anybody else? Okay, seeing nobody step up. Thank you, Mr. Crummett, for your presentation, and then this will come at a later agenda. Okay, moving on. Don't go far, Sam. Moving on to our park plan amendment. This will be a presentation and public hearing. Council, we're going to be presented with information regarding changes to the plan, including pocket parks and neighborhood service areas. Turn it back over to you, Sam.
Okay, again, I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see this map of the city? Okay. There's two changes proposed. The first change is, again, in the comprehensive plan, is to the parks comprehensive plan, I should say, is to specify that the city is not interested in taking pocket parks, but those would need to be privately maintained. That's been our practice, but I think it's important to highlight that in our plan. The main change, and is the primary change, is on our parks map. You'll see that the city's broken up into different districts, and they're labeled by number. And then on, I guess you'd say, the south and west side of our city, there's like some blue areas that start with S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. Those sections in our parks plan don't require a developer to contribute to a neighborhood park. And we are changing all of those to require a developer to contribute to a neighborhood park. And when the plan was developed, it's been probably 15 years. They didn't really envision the city growing out to this area immediately. So they just put these as placeholders. But now that the city's expanding into some of these areas, this is what I would call a quick fix, something that we need to do to assure that developers are contributing to the park's needs at a rate and in a way that's similar to all other parts of our city. Of course, we're going through our citywide parks plan update right now. There may be a totally different way of assessing park needs, but at this point, I think it's important to make sure that the development community is contributing to these areas on the edge of our city. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this with the caveat that they noticed on this map. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. It's not real clear, but there are certain private schools that are on this map, and they asked to take those off. Firm Foundation, Columbia Academy. I think there's another one I can't remember, but like I said to the commission, that the school names I think are just name designations only. They don't really mean anything on this map, but they did want to have those taken off. Any questions?
Okay, Sam, let's go ahead and open up the public hearing, and then we'll go ahead and have Q&A all around. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open up the public hearing for the park plan amendment. Please state your name for the record. Going once, going twice. All right, and seeing nobody that's coming forward, and the city clerk has already chimed in terms of not getting anything in writing on this item. I will go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up to council discussion. Councilmember Walters.
Sam, I just have a point of clarification. So you said that was it the Planning Commission that wanted to take the names of the private schools off them? Is it just the map that they wanted that taken off of, or is it the actual park areas? I was confused about that.
Yeah, it was just the map. It doesn't really, it doesn't have anything to do with parks or park needs. I think it's typical for parks plans to include maps that include schools, because those schools often can kind of share park resources or needs. So I think that's why they're on there, but it doesn't materially do anything. They just, for whatever reason, wanted those off because I think they're private institutions.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walters. Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Sam, on the pocket parks, future pocket parks will be privately taken care of?
That's what I suspect as we go through our parks plan update. That's the policy I think will carry forward. I know that seems to be the majority position on council.
So at that point, then that would mean that the council would require that each neighborhood where these pocket parks reside would have to be HOA. Otherwise, correct. So is it the policy, is it going to be the policy of the city then from here on out that every new neighborhood that comes into the city, building, whatever, will be HOA?
Yeah, yes, that is correct. And I'll try to be specific so we all know what we're talking about with the pocket park. Typically those are 1 acre or less. Typically they might even be like a half acre. They may have a tot lot or something. And so they provide an immediate recreational need for a subdivision, for example. But when you think of Kiwanis Park, that would be considered a neighborhood park, which is like 3 to 5 acres. Parks like that will be city owned and maintained, but we're just talking about the really small ones in subdivisions.
And so current parks, there's one just to the north of me. We'll retain that till the end of time, because obviously who would we get to maintain it at this point? Is that correct? That's
likely, yeah, unless the city was, yeah, that's very likely.
I mean, it's a couple of basketball goals and a teeter-totter kind of thing. So, I mean, I can't imagine someone stepping up and saying, yes, we'll take care of it. But so at what point will we see then at what point does the city see us going HOAs from here on out? Every subdivision HOAs here on out?
I don't think we've really thought through that in terms of requiring HOAs and subdivisions. It's something we can consider.
Well, but you won't have anyone to take care of the park if we don't.
Yeah, if there is a park, then they would need to have an HOA. Our current projects, we state either the developer or the HOA must maintain the park.
So the new development to the north of me on Northwest 25th, huge, the old Clark College supposed campus, those parks will be maintained. I assume that's an HOA then going in there.
That's how the project's been conditioned. They need to form an HOA.
Okay, and so they'll be responsible for the upkeep and the maintenance of all of that.
Yep, trails, all those things.
And then, so will the city then, once a year, once every 6 months or whatever, cruise through and the basketball goals in need of nets or the teeter-totter's broken? Will the city then send a note to the HOA that needs to be fixed quickly?
I don't know if we'll do that unless it's the city's interest to do it. It is a little bit difficult with HOAs because these are, private entities. They can do really well, or some of them cannot do well, and some of them may go defunct. It's, it is, when you turn something over privately, there's no real good guarantee that the goals may be accomplished.
Maybe I misunderstand then the benefit of living in a city. The benefit of living in the city is we have a standard, and whether that standard, when the brand new and it opens up, everything's perfect. 2 years later, it looks like crap and it's all gone to hell. I would imagine the city could step in and say, that's not what we had promised us and what we expect. So Ms. Urban, perhaps then we need to, at some point down the line, we need to tighten up what we expect of HOAs down the line.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that, and that makes total sense because that is a risk. By turning these over to the HOAs or the developer, it's kind of out of our hands. And so do we want to build a bigger policy around this to where we can enforce some requirements of the development itself? So I will work with Mr. Cummett on that as we work through this process before we come back.
Parks are important.
Yeah.
Children need a place to play other than the street. So please, we've been kind of lacking in this over the years. Maybe it's time we pick up our game. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Johnson. Anybody else on this issue? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Crummett.
Thank you.
All right, council, moving on to some other business. This is our Eaton Boulevard, 157th Avenue intersection update. We're going to be presented with some information regarding the intersection and findings from it. I will go ahead and turn it over to our city engineer, Ryan James. Ryan, take it away.
Hold on just a moment, please. I think the cleaning crew is here, so I'm going to shut my office door. Just a moment, please. Thank you. Apologies for that. Good evening, council and citizens of Battleground. In the middle of August, we received a call and email from a citizen with concerns of speed, centerline striping, and a potential or a want to have a full stop controlled intersection at Southeast Eaton Boulevard and Northeast 157th Avenue. data to determine the speed, if traffic volumes met the warrants for a full stop control, as well as looking at centerline striping. And based upon that data, it did not meet warrants volume-wise for making that intersection always stop. I should step back to clarify, maybe some do not know. Currently, the stop control is on Northeast 157th Avenue. Eaton Boulevard is free flow. Given the speed data collected for it, it is posted currently at 50 miles an hour. The 85th percentile, which is the number we use to determine posted speeds and other things from the MUTCD, westbound was 54.1 and eastbound was 56. So given that, the correct speed is what is posted at 50. And then looking at the centerline striping and having a conversation with Clark County, it was determined that there is no mitigation or needed change for centerline striping there or to create a no passing zones. So as with that information, my recommendation to the Public Works Director was to leave the centerline striping, the speed as posted at 50, and to leave the stop control as is at Northeast 157th Avenue. It was noticed in doing a site visit that right-of-way vegetation was having a potential issue with site distance. So a work order has been done to trim down and back vegetation within the right-of-way as you look westbound from 157th Avenue. I have spoken to Clark County and they're going to look into their vegetation as you look eastbound from 157th Avenue, as that is the limits between city and Clark County.
All right. Thank you, Ryan, very much for your presentation. Council, any questions for Mr. James? Councilmember Walters.
Do you know, Ms. Erdman, if we reached out to Mr. Bowman to let him know that we'd be giving this presentation this evening?
I have sent an email, but I have never received anything back.
Can we send out these recommendations to him and
Yes.
and let him know what was determined by this study?
Yes, of course. I will have I'll take Ryan's summary and send it out to Mr. Bowman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walters. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Ryan, for your presentation again.
You're very welcome. Have a nice evening, Council.
Thank you. Okay, Council, next up, we are going to be going into an executive session. So pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, Council will enter into an executive session to discuss potential litigation or legal risk of a proposed action or current practice that the city has identified when public discussion of litigation or legal risk is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the city. This will take approximately 30 minutes with possible action to be taken. And Council, each of you should have the link to that executive session. Councilmember Walters.
I'm confused. Wasn't this the one that we were going to open up to the public?
I think we need to clarify that.
Yeah, Ms. Hayes, can you please jump in?
I can, and I have to apologize to council. I never step away from the meeting. I had a very slight emergency happen right when Mr. Bowman made the initial piece of his motion. Looking back, it looks to me that the motion that was made was to open up the information or discussion that happened at the last executive session that pertained to the medical ordinance, such that there could be communication about that discussion, but that motion did not encompass waiving entering executive session tonight for the continuation of that advice. So that is my understanding of what that motion was, but I will.
Yes, that was my understanding as well. Councilmember Walters, did you have anything further?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay, council, you each have your link. Let's go ahead and meet in about 3 minutes in our first executive session.
Kay? Kay, are you there? Hello?
Hi, sorry, I am here.
Yeah, we need to extend by another 10 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you.
All right, council, looks like we are all here back from our executive session. At this time, I'll ask if actually we're going to head back into another executive session. So pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, council will enter into a second executive session to discuss potential litigation or legal risk of a proposed action or current practice that the city has identified when public discussion of litigation or legal risk is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the city. It's going to be approximately 30 minutes with no action to be taken, with no action to be taken or possible action to be taken. So council, you should have a link to that second executive session. All right, I believe we're all back from our second executive session. I'm just double checking, make sure everybody's here with us. Okay, looks like they are. Okay, council, at this time, again, we just finished our second executive session and reconvene at our regular meeting. I'll go and ask if any council members wishes to make a motion at this time.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, Councilmember Bowman.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, earlier I made a motion to open up the last executive session and waive our privilege from the last executive session that we had 2 weeks ago. I would like to extend that motion or amend my motion, if so be, however Christine wants that, to open up 2 weeks ago and the two that we had tonight to be discussed about in this meeting, please.
Okay, Christine, if I could have Christine chime in, would it be best for Mr. Bowman just to make a standalone motion to open up the executive session, the two executive session meetings from this evening?
I believe that would be most appropriate as the first motion was already separately made and passed.
Okay.
Then I would like to make that motion for the two executive sessions that we had tonight, please.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Bowman. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Deputy Mayor Johnson. If I can have the city clerk, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Bowman,
Yes, ma'am.
Deputy Mayor Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Cortez,
Yes.
Councilmember Walters,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
DeRochers.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. All right, moving on to ordinance number 20-21-19. This is the medical freedom. This is a presentation and potential motion. Council, we're going to consider the adoption of an ordinance in regards to medical freedom as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. This evening's presentation is going to be by the sponsor of this, which is Councilmember Brian Munson. Mr. Munson.
Thank you, Mayor. So since we met last, the only thing that's been added was the punitive part, and there was really no chiming in from anybody on it. So I was trying to find the least punitive to add to it, because to me, this isn't really about the punitive side. So that's the only new addition to this ordinance, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Munson. Council, Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we have the questions that were asked at the last meeting answered? I know one of those was by Councilmember DeRochers about MRSC and the replies that were received from them.
So there was no email to MRSC. There was an inquiry, like I said I was going to do, which was on their webpage, and I went to their FAQs and I typed in the mandate or mandates, if you will, and it related it back to, I don't have the RCW in front of me, but it's listed in the evidence of 43.06. So that was the communication piece of the MRSC. So there was no direct communication with any employee there.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else, council? Okay, seeing none. Council, what is your pleasure on this item? Councilmember Bowman.
Mr. Mayor, would it be appropriate to get the legal counsel's advice out of our executive sessions before we do anything more with this?
Yes, well, given the fact that we've already voted to open up our executive sessions, I think that would be perfectly appropriate. So go ahead and make your request.
Yes, I'd just like to request for the legal advice that we had out of the 3 executive sessions to be put on the record and to let us ask if any questions there before we do anything more.
Okay, so for members of the audience, just so you're aware, we had the legal opinion of our city attorney that was given to us on this issue. And then we also had the legal opinion of an outside independent attorney that council had obtained to provide a legal opinion on this particular item. So let's go ahead and start off with, yes, Deputy Mayor Johnson, please.
Can we start with Mr. Ellis since he's billing us?
That's exactly what I was going to do. Yes, so if I can have Mr. Ellis jump on in. And Mr. Ellis, if you can go ahead and summarize what you stated to council in our most recent executive session.
Certainly. Thank you, everyone. Based upon my review of the ordinance and the existing law in the state, as well as some decisions that have been handed down recently by the U.S. Supreme Court, the Eastern District Washington Court, our Supreme Court's action in imposing a vaccine mandate for its employees, as well as some situations involving impositions of fines through L&I, as well as the RCWs related to the council manager form of government. It's my legal opinion that this ordinance would potentially create liability for the council people in their individual capacities. And as I understand it, there has preliminarily been an indication that this would not be a covered claim by the city's insurance pool. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
All right, council, any questions for Mr. Ellis? Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Mr. Ellis, how much are you charging us per hour, sir?
$230 an hour.
And how many hours, thinking that you'll probably be with us for another 15 or 20 minutes, how many hours roughly have you worked on this?
I estimate it's somewhere between 3 and 6.
So we'll assume $1,500 roughly. And Mr. Ellis, I think one of the questions asked was, we either, to quote founding father, we all hang together or we all hang separately. If we approve this, how do we hang? Separately or together?
I believe it would be separately.
And is it, I think you've read enough knowing that our insurance agency wouldn't cover us in this business. It would be left up to us as individuals to attain our own attorneys and to fight the battle. Is that pretty much what you would surmise?
If a lawsuit were to be brought, depending on who is named as a defendant in that lawsuit, yes.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Ellis, where do you live?
In
what city are you in?
Washington. I'm
okay.
sorry.
I don't want to know where you live. I just want to know what city you're in.
Central Washington.
Central Washington. What would you consider Central Washington to be conservative?
Yes.
Okay. I grew up there. That's how I know. So can you tell us what happened in the Slidewaters lawsuit against the state of Washington, please?
Certainly. From my understanding, Slidewaters had attempted to open when COVID first hit. Slidewaters attempted to open for a period of time, and they were very swiftly shut down by the state. They continued to through both injunctive action and also, I believe, imposition of penalties and fines through either Department of Labor and Industries or WISHA. And they pursued an action through the Eastern District of Washington, which is actually a fairly conservative federal branch of the court. And they were unable to persuade the district court judge here locally that Governor Inslee did not have the authority to impose the shutdown orders that he imposed.
Okay, thank you. When you look at our ordinance and being the city manager being our only employee, would there be, if there is a lawsuit, what, in your estimation, what are the things that we would be on the line for as council members? What kind of lawsuits could be brought against us?
Well, as I indicated in the executive session, I don't want to imply that there's any lawsuit being contemplated or thought of. But if I were an attorney and I represented someone who was put in the position of having to violate the mandates of the state and federal government as a result of being forced to enforce this mandate, I would pursue potentially civil rights violations on behalf of my client, which would open up the possibility for punitive damages and an attorney's fees award. Depending on what happened as a result of being forced to essentially violate the mandates from the federal and state government, if my client were to elect to leave employment, I would pursue a wrongful termination lawsuit. There are, as I indicated, there's in the manager council form of government, there's very clear guidance about who holds the ability to control the employment decisions, who has the hiring and firing authority, disciplinary authority, that kind of thing. So interfering with that would be another potential area to pursue some type of relief.
Okay, and my last question is, what would your advice be for us on this ordinance? Would you suggest this is a good ordinance?
I'm reluctant to comment on whether it's a good ordinance or a bad ordinance. I think that's for you all to decide. But my advice to you would be that if this ordinance is adopted, that you have potentially opened yourselves up for a lawsuit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowman. Anybody else? Any other questions?
May I ask one more?
Yes, Deputy Mayor Johnson, please.
Mr. Ellis, for our edification and the 30 of us that are online, we've heard from everyone that mandates aren't laws. In the state of Washington, does the governor have the authority to issue a mandate with the force of law?
It's my opinion that yes, based upon the decisions that have recently come out of the U.S. Supreme Court, out of the Eastern District of Washington, our Supreme Court's imposition of a vaccine mandate for its own employees. My legal opinion is that if that were challenged in court, yes, there would be a decision made that he does have that authority.
Thank you again, sir.
You're
Good
welcome.
evening.
Okay, council, anybody else? All right, seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Walters.
I would like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-19 medical freedom.
Okay, Councilmember Walters has a motion on the floor.
Second.
And a second. Okay, we're going to go and continue our discussion. Anybody else? Any other questions for Mr. Ellis? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ellis. Appreciate your time this evening, and thank you for your guidance on this issue. Now, if I could have our city attorney, Ms. Hayes, basically do the same thing, provide us a summary of what you stated in executive session.
Thank you, Mayor. As indicated in executive session, the medical freedom ordinance as currently presented would prohibit the city of Battle Ground from mandating any vaccination for an employee, a contractor, or volunteer within the city of Battle Ground. As indicated, the only party who would be in a decision-making position to violate this would be the city manager. At this time, there is no state mandate in effect that would require any employees of the city of Battle Ground to be mandated. However, on September 9th, 2021, President Biden did issue an executive order that will require all employees with more than 100, all employers with more than 100 employees to mandate vaccination or to require weekly COVID testing. OSHA was charged with the responsibility of developing those standards. There's not yet a date for when that's going to go into effect. At this time, depending upon how OSHA ultimately defines an employee for purposes of that mandate, the city does have a maximum of 111 employees, such that if this ordinance were to pass as currently drafted, we may be in a scenario where the city manager is either required to violate a federal executive order and OSHA mandates or to violate this local ordinance. OSHA does have the authority within their power to assess fines up to $14,000 per violation. That can be per violation and per day. A potential risk, if ultimately that federal executive order does apply to the city of Battle Ground, in addition to what I've just indicated, is that we do receive discretionary federal grant funding in our contracts with the federal government. We are required to be in active compliance with all federal laws. If it were ultimately determined that this mandate had the effect of federal law and we were not in compliance therewith, we do have a risk of losing that grant authority. I believe Mr. Ellis has already spoken to concerns about whether or not it's within the scope of the legislative's authority to either mandate vaccines, or in the alternative, as is proposed here, to indicate that the city manager does not have the authority to mandate those vaccines. If there's further questions about that, I'd be happy to address that. I think more importantly is the second half of this medical freedom ordinance, specifically the provision 1D, that would prohibit the city of Battle Ground from mandating any person to wear a face mask while either in a public open space or in a publicly owned facility within the Battle Ground city limits. Under Governor Inslee's September 13th proclamation 20-2517, all governmental entities are prohibited from allowing any individual to enter or remain in any indoor space under their control, unless that individual is in full compliance with the Secretary of Health's face covering order. That same proclamation also mandated that all employers comply with the Department of Labor and Industries mandates requiring masks. Specifically, employers are required to enforce that employees wear masks in indoors. Further, that same proclamation requires all employees to comply with the Secretary of Health mask mandate. Any violation of that proclamation is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. So in the event that this were adopted, and the city manager again would be in a position to either potentially violate Proclamation 20-2517 by allowing persons to enter governmental buildings and by allowing employees to enter the building without a mask, which would be a gross misdemeanor. In the alternative, if she were to adhere to the proclamation and not the local ordinance, she would be subject to a potential misdemeanor as drafted here. Employees would be in a similar position. I believe there's also a potential risk for council members to be in violation of the OPMA. Under the current OPMA proclamation 20-28, public agencies are permitted at this time to include an in-person component to their meetings. We are not currently doing that, but if council were to determine to adopt an in-person component, the only mechanism for doing so is that the meeting has to adhere to what's called the miscellaneous venues guidance, which is incorporated into that proclamation. That requires that during the entirety of the meeting, all persons in attendance are in compliance with Governor Inslee's face mask covering, the Secretary of Health face mask covering, and LNI's face mask covering. If at any time during the public meeting, any person in attendance is not in compliance with that, the council is mandated to recess the meeting until that's restored. Any action that is taken at a meeting that is in violation of OPMA can be held to be an invalid and illegal action. Further, any governing member of the legislative body who attends a meeting where action is taken in violation of OPMA for a first offense is subject to personal liability in the form of a civil penalty in the amount of $500. For a second and subsequent penalty, it'd be $1,000 per meeting. Further, any person who would prevail against a public agency or against governing members for violation of the OPMA is entitled as a matter of law for attorney's fees and costs. As I indicated in the meeting, under the state constitution and under the federal constitution, we do have 3 branches of government. Under that, the legislative body is charged with the authority for adopting laws. The legislative authority, as recently as 2019, adopted RCW 4306-010 that granted the governor emergency authority to issue proclamations prohibiting certain activities, such as going into certain areas without a mask during a public disaster, which is defined to include a public health emergency. The executive branch, which would include the governor, has the authority to employ how they adhere to those laws. Governor. So through these executive orders that the general state is required to follow, and the judiciary is then charged with the authority to determine whether or not the law as written was constitutional or the law as applied. At this point, all challenges that have been made against these mandates have been struck down. It's been continuously held to be valid. So until such time as these mask mandate provisions that are in place are held invalid, it is considered open law, such that we would have a potential issue where we would have a local ordinance that is in direct conflict with state law.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Councilmember Bowman.
Ms. Hayes, what RCW do we as council members fall under our authority and what we do in our form of government?
Sure. In your form of government, you have the same legislative authority as is outlined in RCW 35A 13-230, its powers of council, except insofar as any power and authority is vested in the city manager, which is under RCW 35A 13-080.
Would you say, according to that RCW, that we are stepping outside of our scope of a council member in the city manager form of government?
In my legal opinion, I would concur with the analysis that Mr. Ellis just gave, that under RCW 35A 13-080, which outlines the powers and duties of the city manager's, quote, shall have general supervision over the administrative affairs of the Code City, which has been consistently interpreted to mean that she is charged with authority over employment decisions. Under the governor's current proclamation, an employer has been given authority to mandate vaccinations. Under the council manager form of government, the city council has one employee, which is the city manager. As written, this would be the city council potentially delving into administrative affairs. I'm not aware of this particular challenge being made. So this is simply indicating that I think that there is a risk that this would be outside of the authority.
And Ms. Hayes, you went to law school at one of the greatest law schools around, Gonzaga.
I would agree.
And how long have you been practicing law?
11 years.
Okay. I have two more questions. We've had a motion in a second. Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask Ms. Walters if she has a law degree.
Mr. Mayor, before we do that, oh, never mind.
Thank you.
I don't think that's an appropriate question. I don't think that's an appropriate question, and I don't think you should be addressing questions to me.
I addressed it to Mr. Mayor. You answered it. So if we're gonna sit around and read Robert's rules, then maybe we should read Robert's rules. So I asked the mayor if I could ask Ms. Walters if she has a law degree, and if you're not going to answer that, I'm going to assume that's no. Mr. Mayor, can we ask Mr. Munson if he has a law degree?
Mr. Munson, there's a question on the floor on whether you have a law degree.
Mayor, if that's your question, I'll answer it as a no, but I do assert that that is inappropriate behavior by the council member. Thank you.
So I'm going to assume that's a no also, because if we had law degrees, Ms. Hayes chimed right in and said she had a law degree. Mr. Ellis has a law degree. And we've been
If you listen to my answer, I answered the mayor.
We've been commented, we've been advised by two different attorneys, one who none of us have met, of what the legal ramifications of this are. So as I look at this and we're going through this, it's very simple to me. We are making political statements right now. We are doing that from the dais. We are trying to win elections. We are trying to say we're supporting people, when in all actuality, we are only making laws for the government. We're making laws for the government of the city of Battle Ground, which, Ms. Erdman, can you refresh my memory about how many employees we have that have been vaccinated, to your recollection?
Don't have the exact numbers, but we were around the 40% back in June when we were asking for proof in order to allow employees to be in the public building without masks, but we have not requested that information since then.
So that was 40% vaccinated or unvaccinated?
Vaccinated.
Okay, so let's just say we have roughly 111 employees. So Mr. Johnson will do this faster than me, but that's somewhere around 68 employees that could or could not be vaccinated. Ms. Erdman, do you know how many employees live in the city of Battle Ground? Actually live in our city limits?
I'm not quite sure.
If you were to guess, what would you think?
The majority of them probably live outside of the city limits of Battle Ground.
Live outside of the city limits of Battle Ground. So the citizens of the city of Battle Ground, we know Mr. Johnson asked the question to Mr. Ellis how much he charged. It was roughly $1,500 to $2,000 that we've got wrapped up in him. Ms. Hayes, how many hours? 10 to 16, somewhere in there?
I would estimate, yes.
Okay, and we have employees in the city that have been dealing with this same issue. And so we have council members that are throwing this up for the citizens of Battle Ground when it has nothing to do with the citizens of Battle Ground. We may have less than 10 employees that this actually affects that live in our city, and our entire population, the people that elected us, that put you into office, are paying for this, for us to play political games from the dais. And that's unacceptable. If this was for the entire city, that's something completely different that we could talk about. But we know, just like everybody else knows, we're hearing that we can't do this as it is. There's no way we're doing this for the entire city. And then you would have to step on the toes of private employers that nobody that's supposedly conservative wants to step on the toes of a private employer and tell them you cannot mandate to have vaccinations in the city, and they have to make that choice. One of our largest public employers in the city is Tapani. So if they choose, and I haven't talked to the Tapani organization at all, but if they choose to mandate or not mandate, would it be any different than what we're doing right now when we're talking about the federal funds that we would lose? $24 million that we could lose. And some will say, well, that's just speculation. It hasn't happened yet. I don't want to find that out, nor do I want to see the lawsuit, nor do I want to see what we just paid to play politics for the last 2 weeks from the dais. So I'm pretty sure tonight this will be voted on, and we'll see how it goes. And I have a feeling I know how it will go, because then we can say we tried supporting you. We tried throwing this out there for you and supporting you. And it was never meant to support any citizens of Battle Ground. It was meant to play politics. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowman. Okay, council, this is your opportunity to chime in before we go ahead and take our vote. Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Ms. Hayes, the city's budget is $44 million roughly. If we decide to go this route, and we know that our insurance agency is not going to back us, can all of that $44 million be put at risk by lawyers and plaintiffs?
Potentially. It's hard to speculate what the value of that would be, similar to what Mr. Ellis said, without knowing who a named defendant would be. What we do know from our insurance company is if the city, any employee of the city, or any governing member and or the governing body of the city is named in a lawsuit in association with that, none of those parties would be covered, which means the city would then be required to pay for attorneys and to similarly pay any attorney's fees that could be ordered in the event of a loss, and to similarly pay any fines that would be levied against the city.
My reason for asking that, I just want to see what my compatriots are willing to gamble it obviously, I mean, we've already spent roughly in time in the city, Mr. Ellis, everyone else, we'll just roughly say probably $15,000. I may be up, I'll say 10, just for giggles. And so if we're willing to go that route, then, well, obviously my compatriots are willing to what's $1 million? It ain't their money until the day that we all get hauled in court. Also, I asked Mr. Ellis earlier, do you agree with him that Governor, that the mandate has the force of law in the state of Washington?
I do agree that under RCW 4306-220 subsection 5, the legislature has provided that any person who willfully violates any provision of an order issued by the governor under 4306 is guilty of a gross misdemeanor, such that the proclamations do have the effect of law insofar as you can be criminally liable for violating it.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, 2 years ago, it was 1639, and the city of Battleground was an autonomous island in the middle of the state of Washington. We were going to become a sanctuary city. We haven't heard a thing about that since the Wednesday after that election. There were people in the audience here and people on this dais tonight who swore on the Almighty that they were going to fight that. Well, here we are again, 2 years later. We're an autonomous island in the middle of the state of Washington. We're willing to gamble $24 million from Uncle Sam, a $44 million budget, $68 million total, so that Mr. Munson can tell folks, as he did a month ago in Vancouver, that there's only one person in the city of Battleground who will stand up and fight for them. Well, that's an awfully big task, Mr. Munson, and you've asked the other 5 of us to join in with you to put our financial lives at risk, so that you may say that it's worth the cost. If that's so, sir, then fight him yourself. This is tilting at windmills, in my estimation. We've wasted enough time on this. I don't have the time nor the inclination for any more politics from the city council. Fight the fight, win your race, whatever happens, I don't care. But sir, please, I would ask you now just to withdraw it, but I don't think that's going to happen. So, Mr. Mayor, I look forward to the vote. Let's do whatever we're going to do and move on to whatever business the city has that matters to the 21,000 plus people in the city of Battleground. Roads, parks, cops, streets, those kinds of things, water, sewer, and this fluff stuff, maybe we can get on past. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Johnson. Councilmember DeRochers.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I believe medical freedom is important, and I really wish that this ordinance didn't have such a negative impact on our city, because I am supportive of medical freedom and I certainly don't like mandates. I don't see how I can support this moving forward. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeRochers. Anybody else? Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we vote, I would love to hear from all of our council. We've had council members that haven't said anything about this. We've looked at this 2 weeks and haven't said a thing, haven't went on the record, yes or no, or this is how I feel, this is nothing. And we're going to take a vote tonight, and this is purely political, like I said before. So everyone's had a chance to the last 2 weeks, but we've had council members that haven't said a thing and are going to vote on this. And I think that's wrong. I think the citizens should know where you stand. I think the citizens should know that you're willing to put their money on the line, or you're not willing to put their money on the line. I think it's cowardice to sit here and not do your job, and that's to bring your opinions and to have discussion with your council. And I think the citizens need to watch this vote and see how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowman. And while people aren't obligated to chime in by any means, I definitely encourage council members that have not chimed in to take this opportunity to chime in on this topic.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we go ahead and take the vote because the silence says everything that we need to know, sir.
Okay. Will the city clerk please take a roll call vote?
Mr. Mayor, there were citizens' comments that were submitted.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Want me to read those in? Okay.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. I had so much going on. Can you please read the citizens' comments into record before we take our vote?
Certainly, and then I'll read the ordinance title also.
Thank you.
This first one comes in anonymously. I am writing today to express my deepest concerns over the stupidity of having an ordinance that goes against Washington state and federal mandates regarding masks and vaccines. You all do realize that individuals vaccinated are significantly less likely to end up in the hospital, and that by not enforcing mask mandates, you are only asking for our hospital systems to be overrun to the point where others requiring care are unable to receive that care. And I honestly, as public service, would expect you all, the police, the fire departments, to embrace vaccination to set an example. You all are supposed to act in the interests of the people you represent and help lead by example. The COVID-19 virus has been allowed to mutate as a direct result of people like yourselves politicizing this situation. As a nation, we've had more deaths now from COVID-19 as compared to the Spanish flu. Everyone is running around screaming about freedoms, life, liberty, etc. Well, what about the lives of those citizens that don't want to be impacted as a result of the stupidity of others? Why should I or my family pay the price so that you can win the support of a bunch of Trump supporters? I read the proposed ordinance and have concluded that the arguments for the ordinance are based on complete ignorance, selfishness, and absolutely zero science. Your whole argument about herd immunity and 70% as a country, we never achieved 70% because of the politics and stupidity. Your ordinance is designed to be political, and that much is obvious. Put the politics aside and do what is best to end this pandemic. Do not dare argue for liberties and life from the Constitution. If you understood the Constitution and US history, then you would understand that these mandates are completely illegal. As a citizen of the United States, I am entitled to life, liberty, and safety, and this ordinance removes these rights to me. I understand that I can still get a vaccine, and I have, and that I can still wear a mask, and I do, but you are encouraging stupidity and creating a breeding ground for the virus to mutate further. How many people must die? How many people must beg for the vaccine after it is too late? How many patients must be turned away due to an overrun emergency rooms? I plead with you all not to approve this politically motivated ordinance. We do not want to be another Florida, regardless of how cool you may think it is to kill off your constituents. Next one is from Kay Moran. Please oppose any attempt by selfish and ill-informed council members to defy the governor's mask mandate. How many people have to die for such people to show some reason and empathy for others? I am sick of catering to selfish people who won't get vaccinated and won't wear masks. Those of us who do both are still trapped in our homes because of the lack of concern and failure to recognize that we all need to do this for the public good. I am ashamed of these people. Also, they have no right to ever call themselves Christians. Though such selfish sorts often try to claim that designation. Jesus would cast them out of office. Please do not call me in response. Just register my opinion and officially oppose the proposed ordinance. The next one is from Martha Wiley. I live in the city of Vancouver and have come to Battleground numerous times, mostly to eat in the restaurants, but also to go to your beautiful library. I'm sad to tell you that my family and I won't be visiting your city again if you pass the ordinance presented by Councilmember Munson, prohibiting the city from requiring that any of your employees, contractors, volunteers be vaccinated. I understand the ordinance also prohibits businesses from asking for proof of vaccination or passing face mask or physical distancing mandates. We won't feel safe in your city if this ordinance passes, so we won't be visiting until the pandemic is over or until you allow proper safeguards. My husband volunteers at your library and he will be forced to stop if this ordinance passes. I'm sure we aren't the only out-of-towners who feel the same way. Thank you for your consideration. The next is from Meg Home. I wish to express my strong opposition and concern about the idea of fighting Governor Inslee COVID restrictions that are keeping so many of us safe. I already refuse to go to the theater in Battleground or any restaurant due to problems with compliance. If this is enacted, I will be unable to shut business in BG and will have to drive to a safer area for all my shopping and other needs. Please help protect this community. 2000s are dying daily from COVID. Keep Battleground safe. Mr. Bill Jackson, I am calling because I read that the city may consider an ordinance defying Governor Inslee order. I disagree with the ordinance. I feel that it is reasonable to require a mask and vaccination of city employees. I think the city should not pass the ordinance. Christina Green, thank you for taking the time to read this email. My name is Christina Green. I also believe that all of our freedoms are in jeopardy of being taken away from us daily. I was informed by the news that Battleground was fighting for medical freedom and pushing back against the mandate. Thank you. As a healthcare worker and the grandmother of 2 school-aged children, I am praying very hard that more cities fight back like you. Yes, Mr. Inslee has stepped over his power of government. He has violated our state and federal constitution. He also made an amendment in the emergency powers to extend his powers without allowing the legislative branch of the government to do their job they are elected to do. Mandates are not laws. Mr. Inslee needs to be removed from office. He is extremely corrupt and hungry on power. I hope and pray that the City Council of Battleground stands up tall and wins against this tyranny. Thank you. God bless America and all the small towns fighting to stay free. The last one is from Mr. Felix Hansen. Please pass the medical freedom ordinance that I was reading about in the Columbian. Just knowing that this is being considered gives me hope. I love my city and I'm happy to know that my local representatives actually care about citizens' freedoms, rights, and the state constitution. Thank you all. Ordinance number 21-19, an ordinance of the city of Battleground, Washington, providing for medical freedom. And the roll call vote. Councilmember Walters?
Yes.
Munson?
Yes.
DeRochers?
No.
Bowman?
Absolutely not.
Deputy Mayor Johnson?
No, ma'am.
And Mayor Cortez?
No. Okay, ordinance fails. Okay, moving on to our next item. This is ordinance number 2021-20. This is our Juneteenth holiday. This will be a motion. Council will consider the adoption of an ordinance authorizing the recognition of the Juneteenth holiday. I will go ahead and turn it over to our city manager.
Mayor Cortez, yes, we discussed this at the last meeting on September 20th, where staff was asking if council would like to recognize June 19th as a holiday. So in front of you is the ordinance that amends Title I under, so it's section 1.04.003 and adds Juneteenth to the list of official holidays for the city of Battleground. So I will be here to answer any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you. Council, Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Ms. Erdman, if June 19th falls on a Saturday, we'll just, that's the holiday. I'm assuming, just like, if it falls on a specific day, Labor Day is the first Monday in September, Veterans Day is the second Monday in November, those days are specific. If it falls on a Sunday, I'm assuming that we'll celebrate in the city of Battleground on Sunday. Everyone will be at work on Friday and Monday.
The way the ordinance is written now is whenever a recognized holiday falls upon a Sunday, the following Monday shall be the recognized holiday. And whenever it falls on a Saturday, the preceding Friday shall be the recognized holiday.
Thank you, Ms. Urban.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, seeing nobody. Before I move forward on this, do we have to have a public hearing on this, Ms. Hayes? Or did I miss something?
Nope, no public hearing would be required for this.
Okay, thank you. If I can get as long as there's nobody else that would like to chime in on this, if I can get the city clerk to please read the ordinance by title.
Ordinance number 21-20, an ordinance amending Battleground Municipal Code Title I, General Provisions, Chapter 1.04 regarding recognized legal holidays.
All right, if I can
Move to approve.
to get a motion. I got a motion by Councilmember Bowman. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second by Deputy Mayor Johnson. If I can get a roll call vote.
Councilmember Bowman,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeRochers,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
Mayor Cortez.
Yes. All right, ordinance passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to administrative reports. Actually, excuse me, I stand corrected. We wanted to add Mr. Johnson's item of the banner poles, I believe.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. The last meeting in September at the study session, we talked about the banner poles. The city is in the middle of setting up the budget for the coming year. Plus, we're trying to figure out the roadway budget that Main Street and the highway. And at that point, Mr. Herzig stated and Ms. Erdman stated that the poles would be wooden and would be $20,000 a piece for a total of $40,000. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and call for a vote tonight so that Ms. Erdman can finish up the budget, of which we should have done, I would imagine, by the 1st of November, the middle of November, and that Mr. Herzig can go ahead and get his work done as far as laying out the street budget and the highway budget with the state and whomever else is involved.
Okay, so just to clarify, Mr. Johnson, are you saying you wanted to add the cost of those poles into our budget?
No, well, I'm just asking for a vote up or down on whether that we want the poles or not at $40,000.
Okay, so whether this is a vote, whether we would like to include the cost of replacing those poles in the city budget, yes or no? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Bowman. Okay, discussion. Councilmember Munson.
Thank you, Mayor. Aaron, there was discussion years ago about this when this first came up, and there was the opportunity for some in-kind donations from different businesses. It was there was some level of participation that we'd be allowed to do. What has changed since then that's causing this to be such an increase in the cost?
And Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't gone down the path that I'm aware of to approach businesses for those types of donations. This cost is just a quote from engineering and construction. So it's not taking into account any donations that may be received for this.
Okay, so when we did discuss that though, there was the opportunity for it. So are we not going to revisit that?
I would say we certainly can, at the direction of council, we can look into that.
Well, I appreciate Deputy Mayor Johnson's motion to move forward with this. I would like to move forward with what it looks like, but I would like to know if we have the opportunity to have businesses to contribute without violation of any of the contracts like we discussed a few years ago. Could we look at that to save some cost?
Yeah, certainly if in January or February of next year, someone comes along and says, I've got 2 creosote poles that'll fit in there and you're more than welcome to them. I can't imagine the city turning that down. But at this point, budgets need to be made and either the poles are going in or they're not. And an up and down vote, yes on the polls, no on the polls.
Just to reiterate too, on Mr. Johnson's point, we would add the budget amount to we would add the dollar amount to the budget so that we have approval to move forward with that. And then we can, of course, ask for and whatever work we can do to offset that cost we could do in 2022. This would just basically put it in the budget so that we can move forward with the project and then we can work on those other items.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we revisit what we've already talked about once before, regardless of the moving forward with it tonight. I want to make sure we do diligence there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Yes, Ms. Hayes.
I think we may need to clarify the substance of the motion so that folks know what voting yes means and voting no. As I understand,
the motion is, do we add $40,000 to the budget to cover the cost of two poles, two signage poles on the corner of the highway and Main Street? Is that clear?
That was,
Yes,
that was
so-
pretty clear in the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, any further conversation on this? Okay, let's take, Councilmember Bowman.
Yeah, I would rather, Mr. Munson brought up the city business or the businesses in the city that want to use it. And anytime we do a line item on a budget, it doesn't make us go out and get the money to get it. So we're going to authorize the money. So I believe that the city would go out and try and recruit people, but it's not as dire to do so if we have $40,000 in that to put them up anyways. But that's just my opinion on this right now.
Yeah, that was clarified earlier.
Thank you. I was talking to the city manager.
Okay, let's take a roll call vote.
Deputy Mayor Johnson,
No.
Councilmember Bowman,
No.
Munson,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
DeRochers,
I think I need clarification on what we're voting on here. 'Cause
You're
now I'm
voting to add $40,000 to the budget to buy two poles on the corner of Main Street and the highway to hang signs from. A yes vote says, please add 40 grand to the budget. A no vote says, I'm going to pass on the 40 grand. Therefore, we're going to pass on the poles. Is that before I want to make sure, Ms. Hayes, is that what you understood as well?
that is what I understood. I just wanted to make sure for the record we're clear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
and Mayor Cortez.
Well, let's bring Christmas back, I guess, since people have said so much about the season's greetings. Yes. All right, motion passes.
Right, and we will definitely, I will work with the PACEP board as they have been working on this to see if we can talk about the donation piece of this. Follow up with that.
All right, on to administrative reports. Do you have anything further, Ms. Urban?
Nope, the polls was the only thing I had, so that concludes admin reports.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, on to council communications. Councilmember DeRochers.
Yes, so hopefully this is the appropriate time to do this. This is a two-parter. I wanted to thank all of council for sending me the beautiful bouquet of flowers today. And then I would like to apologize for crying during some of the public comment. It hit pretty hard. I just lost my stepdad to COVID on Friday, 52 years old, young. Didn't think he needed to be vaccinated because he worked from home most of the time. He ended up getting COVID and just couldn't handle it. So anyways, thank you very much for the flowers. I really appreciate it. They're beautiful and really meant a lot to me today. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeRochers. Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have two things. Number one, I just want to publicly thank Senator Rivers for the opportunity that we've had to work with her for the last 11 years in our city, and the money that she has helped bring to our city now that she's moving on to her new position, which is exciting at the city of Longview. I may have thrown our city manager under the bus with to accept calls from Senator Rivers if she needs any information or help. But she was a great representative for us, and look forward to see what we have next. The second thing I wanted to bring up is in the council governance manual, it talks about electronic devices from the dais. We are on the dais right now, and I have had multiple people text me and talk to me about electronic devices that are being used by council members on the dais. Some of it's obvious, some of it's not so obvious, but they are seeing this. That, and correct me if I'm wrong, Christine, those are subject to public record, possibly. And so when we are using electronic devices from the dais, we need to make sure that it is appropriate to what we are doing in our meetings, whether that be using them for, we all have electronic devices, but if that's using them for our packets and those type of things, but texting individuals or people back and forth, I don't think is appropriate according to our governance manual. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. I'll just echo that. If we can discourage the use of cell phones, I don't use a cell phone when I'm at my council meetings. I know those of you that are wearing glasses, pay particular attention. We can all see what you're texting with the reflection of your glasses. And so I would urge you caution with that. So with that said, our next council meeting is scheduled for October 18th, 2021. Our regular meeting will begin at 7 p.m. Have a safe and wonderful rest of the week. See everybody later. We are adjourned.